Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Brian Liddy and it is Tuesday the 7th of May. Brian checks notes. I'm joined this evening by Sandra White. Sandra, you're a retired SNP MSP and you are an advocate of social justice and asylum seekers' rights, and you've also been interested and worked with Palestine when you were an MSP in Holyrood and worked within a cross-party setting. So I think all of that makes you an expert to contribute to tonight's topics. But thank you for taking time out and joining us this evening.
And thank you for inviting me along, and I hope that your leg gets better, Brian.
It's
You're
getting
a very
better.
brave person struggling along.
No, not at all, not at all. It's a pleasure and gets me out the house and all of that and gets me to chat to you. So thank you. So I'll start with our Ukraine update, and today is day 804. The UK, US and most EU nations will boycott a Kremlin ceremony to swear in Vladimir Putin for a new 6-year term as president on Tuesday, but France and some other EU states were expected to send an envoy despite a plea by Kyiv. Russia threatened to strike British military facilities and ordered its military to hold battlefield nuclear weapons drills in a move the Kremlin described as a response to comments from the French President Emmanuel Macron and from the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron. Macron has said he would not rule out the possibility of sending troops to Ukraine, and Cameron said it was up to Kyiv how it used British weapons, including against targets inside of Russia. French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen pressed Chinese leader Xi Jinping at a summit in Paris on Monday to use Beijing's influence to halt the Russian war against Ukraine. Europe is concerned that while officially neutral over the Ukraine conflict, China is essentially backing Russia, which is using Chinese machine tools in arms production. Russian forces have taken control of the settlements of Solovyiv in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region and Kotylarivka farther north in the Kharkiv region. The Defence Ministry said on Monday Ukraine's military made no mention of either locality in its evening General Staff report. The Ukrainian weightlifter Oleksandr Pilishenko, who finished fourth in the 85kg light heavyweight category at the Rio Olympic Games in 2016, has been killed defending his country. The news was confirmed by the National Olympic Committee of Ukraine, who said Pilishenko died during combat operations on Sunday. He had joined up in the first few days of the Russian invasion in 2022. A Russian journalist who has worked for both state-funded and independent media was detained on Monday and faces charges of justifying terrorism through posts on a Telegram messaging app, her lawyer said. Nadezhda Kirokova is expected to appear in court today. If convicted, she could be sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. Akilgov said the charges involve two posts, one in 2018 and the other in 2021. Forgive me, I'm just going to take a drink of water. An American soldier was detained in Russia last week on charges of criminal misconduct, the US Army said on Monday. The soldier, whose name has not been released, adds to the number of Americans held in Russia at a time of deep tensions within Washington over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza, who has written columns as a contributor for the Washington Post from his prison cell in Russia, won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary. The Russian politician, author and historian has been imprisoned in Russia since April 2022. He was convicted of treason last year for denouncing the war in Ukraine. On Monday, the Polish government said it was financing the operation of 20,000 Starlink internet devices in Ukraine, an essential network for the country's military communications as it fights off Russia's invasion. Starlink, owned by Elon Musk's SpaceX, is a network of satellites in low Earth orbit that can provide internet to remote locations or areas that have had normal communications infrastructure disabled. Sandra, that was quite a lengthy Ukraine update. I'm beginning to think that as the days pass, they're getting longer and longer, these daily updates. Is there anything that caught your eye there that you'd like to enlarge upon?
Quite a few things actually. If I could start from obviously, David Cameron and the British involvement in regards to, and obviously then France as well, in regards to they may put troops in. That's it's very, very worrying. The fact that even in the House of Commons, they won't tell us, how often they have flew planes, landed at Press Week, and on, or also the facts about the weapons as well. I think it's a very worrying, secretive society. It's always been that way inclined, and I include NATO in that as well. But the fact of the matter is, it's for the Ukrainian people. I mean, what is it? Well over 800 days this has been going on, and it's very worrying. People are being killed there as well. People are being displaced, and I know we'll go on to Gaza. Excuse me. After this particular introduction, and we've got lots of Ukrainians here in Scotland and the UK as well. When is it going to stop? And what right has the UK government to deploy weapons, and also France saying they're going to deploy troops, and we will deploy troops as well, I have absolutely no doubt, without there even being a vote in the House of Commons? You're talking about, being involved in an actual war between Russia and Ukraine, and yet no one in the House of Commons has got a vote on that at all. And just to throw into the mix, Brian, as well, you did bring in the USA. When you look at the conflicts, particularly here in Ukraine and obviously also in Gaza and Palestine, they seem to be the ones that's involved all the time. And yet there's no stopping them. I don't think Zelensky really understands, and I'm not an expert on this, but really understands the situation geopolitical as a whole. I know that obviously he's a president and he's pushing to, get parts of Ukraine back. But in my opinion, and I could possibly be wrong, I feel as though the poor Ukrainians are being used, and I don't say that lightly, being used by the EU, by Europe, and by America as well. And somebody's got to ask or explain why they're being, in my opinion, used, the Ukrainian people who are being killed. And there's lots of Ukrainians who are refusing to go back to Ukraine. I think I saw an article today regarding that. Young men who are refusing to go back to Ukraine and get conscripted into the army. They feel it is not their fight. So somebody's got to look at this whole thing in the round and actually match up to what's happening in the Middle East as well, because there's wars on all sides, and absolutely no way should Britain be supplying weapons or putting troops on the ground in Ukraine without having it come to the House of Commons and having a debate and a vote on it. People are suffering, and I would like to know the real reason behind all of this. I've never been a supporter of NATO. I led a debate in not the Scottish Parliament, but the SNP conference a number of years ago, and we only against being a member of NATO, and I'm still against being a member of NATO. We only lost it by 25 votes, so that's pretty big in the sense of it was a huge conference, it was a national conference. And a lot of people are thinking like me and do think like me. What is NATO's role in all of this? I say it all the time, I think I've said it before on this programme as well. I would like to know exactly what NATO's playing at. We now have Russia, whether you like them or you don't, surrounded by NATO countries now. So I think it needs more explanation. What is it all about? Is it all about oil, minerals, monies, capitalism? Somebody's got to explain that, and I'd like them to explain it to me as well.
Thank you, Sandra. And that kind of brings us neatly on to the next item, which is our routine Gaza update. So, yeah, let's go into that. So, According to the Gaza Health Ministry, at least 34,789 Palestinians have been killed, including 14,944 children and 9,849 women since October 7th. At least 78,204 are reported to have been injured. Excuse me. The Secretary General warned that Gaza may run out of fuel as quickly as tonight, following Israel's closure of the Kerem Shalom crossing and seizure of the Rafah crossing on Gaza's border with Egypt. Speaking at a press conference, Antonio Guterres said agreement between the government of Israel and the leadership of Hamas is essential to stop the unbearable suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and the hostages and their families. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, told the media that despite the explicit warnings of the EU, the US and others, The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, told the media that despite the explicit warnings of the EU, the US and others, Israel's determination to carry out an offensive in Rafah will lead to the deaths of more civilians, whatever they say. Israel carried out airstrikes in eastern Rafah after issuing orders for the evacuation of 100,000 Palestinians from part of the city earlier on Monday, triggering an exodus of thousands of people. The Israeli ministry later said on Monday it was conducting targeted strikes against Hamas in Rafah, where 1.4 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering. There were reports of Israeli tanks on the eastern outskirts of Rafah, and a Palestinian security official and an Egyptian official said they had reached as close as 200 metres from Rafah's crossing with neighbouring Egypt. Palestinian hospital officials said one strike on a house in Rafah late Monday killed 5 Palestinians, including a woman and a girl. 22 people, including 2 babies and other children, were killed in earlier strikes on Monday. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said even the best friends of Israel are clear an assault on Rafah would be a strategic mistake, a political calamity, and a humanitarian nightmare. Strikes came as Hamas said it had agreed to a Gaza ceasefire proposal from mediators. Hamas said in a brief statement that its chief, Ismail Haniyeh, had informed Qatari and Egyptian mediators that the group accepted their proposal for a ceasefire, prompting initial celebrations from Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that the truce proposal fell short of Israel's demands and that his war cabinet had approved continuing an operation in Rafah. Hundreds of Israelis converged on the main military headquarters in Tel Aviv, calling for a deal. Smaller gatherings were reported in Jerusalem and other cities across Israel. US President Joe Biden has urged Netanyahu not to launch an offensive in Rafah, the White House said. President Biden hosted King Abdullah II of Jordan for a private lunch meeting at the White House on Monday to discuss the war and hostage talks. Jordan's embassy in Washington said in a posting on the social media site X following the leaders' meeting that Abdullah warned that an Israeli operation on Rafah threatens to lead to a new massacre. Sandra, normally I would invite you to, again, pick something from there to talk about, but actually the next item is going to be about Israel directly. So with your permission, is it okay for me to go on to the next item and we can maybe try and wrap it all up together? Would that be okay?
If you wish to balance it.
Yeah, and try and link them. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So Stephen Flynn has said Israel's rejected ceasefire and attack on Rafah requires decisive and tangible action from Westminster, including ending arms sales to Israel immediately. The SNP Westminster leader has said that the UK government is failing the people of Gaza by constantly equivocating. The SNP previously attempted to table a motion mandating the UK government to immediately end arms sales to Israel, but it was blocked by the House of Commons. SNP MPs also signed a letter calling on the Foreign Secretary and Business Secretary to immediately suspend export licences for the arms transfers to Israel. The letter was also signed by 134 MPs and lords from across the political spectrum. Commenting, Stephen Flynn MP said, "By continuing to supply the very weapons afflicting collective punishment on Palestinian people, Westminster is failing the people of Gaza and is implicit in the deaths of tens of thousands." He went on to say the attack on Rafah by the Israeli government, as well as the rejection of a ceasefire, requires decisive and tangible action from this UK government. Right now, the best way to increase diplomatic pressure for peace is to end arms sales to Israel. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer must back ending arms sales to Israel. It's time for consensus. Flynn continued, "For months, Westminster parties dithering over calling for an immediate ceasefire, and now they're doing the same for ending arms sales to Israel. The SNP has been clear and consistent. All international efforts need to be made to secure a ceasefire, and an important part of that pressure is ending arms sales to Israel immediately." Sandra, it does seem like this is a repetition. You'll remember that Stephen Flynn devoted the SNP's Opposition Day debate to a ceasefire in Gaza, and it was stolen by Labour. It seems that Flynn is ahead of the Labour opposition party again, because last week's PMQs, Starmer didn't mention Gaza at all, and Stephen Flynn devoted his two questions to ending arms, and we're just trying to relate it to the update. And we've got David Cameron's name coming up more and more. Rafah, that looks like we've been warning about an invasion there, and now there's talk about talks and a ceasefire and things. So, do you think the SNP is again ahead of Labour opposition on this matter?
I think they're ahead of all of the Westminster parties, and basically ahead of a number of European parties and also the USA as well. And it's not, to my mind, it's not even party political. It shouldn't be party political. It's about people. It's about humanity. And if you don't believe in humanity, and it's a genocide that's happening. There's young kids being murdered every day. You're talking 34,000 people. It's an absolute genocide. So for me, it's not even party politics or party political, although the SNP are the only party that's been calling for that, with exceptions, some exceptions from other parties too. It's about the fact that this has been a plan which has been long going. Netanyahu said it's all to do with the various religious aspects of the Zionists, because that's what they are, Zionists. And I must say, I applaud the people in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the Jewish people who are out in the streets as well, which obviously we don't see here. And I absolutely applaud all the young folk and folk that have joined them in the colleges and universities throughout Europe, and more than that, India, Pakistan, you name it. The world is saying this is wrong and it's got to stop. I'm really sick, and I'm sick and tired of the fact that there's all this talk and you have meetings and all of that stuff, and there's no action whatsoever. And to think, Israel, the Zionists, they have committed horrendous crimes. They've been reported, as we know, to the ICC, and they're just saying, we don't care, we'll just go ahead and do what we do. And the world, the governments anyway, are sitting back and watching this genocide happen. At the moment, with the Rafah crossing, it's closed. It's closed. There is no, you mentioned earlier on about media, and yet you mentioned Elon Musk being able to have these satellites that he was going to offer that to the Palestinian people, then had a meeting with Netanyahu, and then that was pulled. So he didn't offer it. You've got to ask yourself, why is it that every single thing Israel does is being, basically allowed, and they're allowed to do it with no discrimination against them, apart from the ordinary public. And that's what I think, when I was talking to you earlier, Brian, when I said I'm a great believer in politics of the grassroots, from the grassroots up, not from the top down. And at this moment in time, the way you look at the situation and the people who are out there, the young folk and the Jewish folk in Israel as well, who are saying, ceasefire now, stop this genocide, that's coming from members of the public. That's not coming from politicians, that's not coming from the top, that's coming from the people. And yet they're not being listened to. Unless they get rid of them in the ballot box in the elections. But we are looking at, gosh, babies being killed, murdered by a Zionist regime whose whole reason for it is basically to wipe Palestine off the map. And that's what they're doing. Now, I'd be interested to see what Egypt's going to do, because basically that was a red line. The red line was, do not invade Rafah. They have invaded Rafah. There's tanks going in there now. The gates are closed. What is Egypt going to do? I'm very disappointed in a number of these countries, Egypt, Jordan, various other, the Middle East, who are, they talk a good game, but they're doing nothing. And these people are on the verge of extinction, basically. And what the Zionists want, and they're getting away with it, they're getting rid of the whole of Palestine and the Palestinian people. I mean, there's lots of stuff happening in the West Bank as well, which we don't hear about. And now Al Jazeera's banned. That's worse than Hitler even, when you ban the media and it's only your media that's getting out. And I know it may be controversial to say that, but that's what's happening. Basically, there's no foreign journalist being able to get in there. You can't, UNRWA's not even being able to get in. Everybody is basically a Hamas supporter, according to the Zionists. And yet these people are being massacred day by day. And now they're in Rafah, and all these people are being told to move again. For goodness sake, there's old people, babies, pregnant women, etc. How are they supposed to move? They're exhausted if they're still alive. And I would be looking to see what's going to happen with Egypt. As the Middle East, basically it's like a time bomb just now. And then earlier on we were talking about Ukraine. And you've got all these things going on. And, persons that are pulling the strings is America as well, and Britain, by supplying weapons.
Thank you, Sandra. I suppose we'll keep an eye on the situation and see if Labour and, as you say, other countries are going to catch up with Stephen Flynn and the SNP stand in Westminster. But thank you for that. So, John Swinney has been nominated as the 7th First Minister of Scotland following a vote in the Scottish Parliament today. MSPs voted 64 to 57 to select Mr Swinney as First Minister from a total of 4 nominees. There were 7 abstentions. Mr Swinney is anticipated to be formally appointed as First Minister this afternoon with a royal warrant from His Majesty King Charles III. He will be officially sworn in at the Court of Session on Wednesday, where he will take the official oath in front of the Lord President of the Court of Session and other senior judges. And so we have a video here is Mr Swinney's acceptance speech to the Scottish Parliament this afternoon.
Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to Douglas Ross, Anna Sawar, Lorna Slater and Alex Cole-Hamilton for their kind comments this afternoon, and especially their comments in relation to the support of my family. Presiding Officer, when I stood down as Deputy First Minister in March last year, I believed that would be the last senior office I would hold in politics. Having served then as a senior minister for 16 years, I felt I had, to coin a phrase, done my bit. To find myself accepting office as First Minister of Scotland today is therefore, to utter a classic understatement, something of a surprise. It is, however, an extraordinary privilege, and it is my honour to accept the office of First Minister, committing myself to do the best I can for Scotland. As I navigated my way through the media pack in the corridors of this Parliament last week, prior to announcing my candidacy for the SNP leadership, I tried to explain that I was taking my time to decide whether to stand, because I had to be certain it was a decision that was right for my family. For me, my answers to the media were not a stalling tactic or an evasive answer from an experienced politician. For me, it was the truth. Members will know that my wife Elizabeth has multiple sclerosis. She is indefatigable in trying to make sure that MS does not get in the way of her living life to the full. But much to her frustration, she does often have to rely on her husband for support and assistance. I could not just commit myself to become First Minister without being able to properly work out with my family how we would be able to manage as a family. We've talked that through, and we will manage. But I cannot let this moment pass without making clear to Elizabeth my profound eternal gratitude for the sacrifices she is prepared to make to enable her husband to serve our country as First Minister. I am so pleased that my father, my wife and children, members of my family and our dearest friends are able to be here today to see this moment. My only regret is that my beloved mother did not live long enough to see this day. As her parish minister wrote to me yesterday, your mum would have been quietly proud. My mother's love of literature and poetry, which rubbed off on her two sons, would have prompted her to find some words that would sum up this moment. Yesterday I was asked what would be the single most important policy objective for my government. I made it clear it would be the eradication of child poverty. So in searching for words to sum up this occasion, perhaps my mother would have chosen these words from one of Scotland's greatest poets, Hamish Henderson, who was born in Blairgowrie, in the very beating heart of my Perthshire North constituency. In his epic anthem, Freedom Come All Ye, which I heard Hamish Henderson sing from an open-top bus in the meadows of our great capital city during a rally that demanded the establishment of this very Parliament in the early 1990s. Hamish Henderson wrote, "So come all ye at hame with freedom, never heed what the hoodies croak for doom. In your house all the bairns of Adam can find breed, barley brie and painted room." If there was ever an anthem that railed against child poverty, those words from Hamish Henderson echo through the straths and streets of our diverse country as a call for us to act. So I will be unapologetic about bringing to this Parliament the measures we can take to eradicate child poverty, and I look forward to seeking the support of others to achieve that aim. Because I recognise that's how it's going to have to work. I am leading a minority government. I will need to reach out to others to make things happen, to pass legislation, to agree a budget. To pass legislation, to agree a budget. These sound like dry, technical parliamentary terms. But what they mean in reality is if we want to fund our schools and hospitals, if we want to give our businesses a competitive edge, if we want to take climate action, if we want to eradicate child poverty, if we want to change people's lives for the better, we have got to work together to do so. This Parliament, as colleagues have fairly recognised, is intensely polarised at this time. I accept my part in creating that environment, whether that is by shouted put-downs from the front bench or heckling from a sedentary position. I do promise, Presiding Officer, that that will all stop. I have changed. Perhaps time will tell on that one. This is not the collaborative place it has been in the past. A collaborative place that has done so much good to improve the lives of people in Scotland. As the Parliament marks its 25-year anniversary, and as one of the relatively small group who have been here from the start, I reflect on the major developments that have taken place by collaborative work and agreement over that time. Major developments taken forward by the Labour and Liberal executive, such as the ban on smoking in public places, or minimum unit pricing by the SNP government, or the introduction of free bus travel for under-22s by the SNP Green Partnership. I commit my government to working to create that agreement across the chamber. I hope there is space and the willingness for that to happen in the interests of the people who sent us here. Now, it is hardly a surprise to anyone in this chamber that I believe that this country could do more if we had the powers of a normal, independent nation. Others in this chamber take the opposite view. That is the essence of democracy. People free to hold and express and pursue different opinions. The question we face in this Parliament today, however, is a more practical one. Does our disagreement on the Constitution prevent us from working collaboratively within the existing powers of the Parliament to eradicate child poverty, build the economy, support jobs, address the cost of living crisis, improve the health service and tackle the climate crisis? I will give all of my energy and my willingness to engage and listen to ensure that that is not the case. I invite others to do the same. Presiding Officer, when I pitched up at Forrester High School in this city in 1979, at the age of 15 wearing my SNP badge, and my friends and teachers wondered why I had become involved in this fringe party, I could scarcely have imagined that my journey would involve becoming the First Minister of Scotland. It is an extraordinary privilege to hold this office, and I thank Parliament warmly for the honour that has been given to me. To the people of Scotland, I would say simply this: I offer myself to be the First Minister for everyone in Scotland. I am here to serve you. I will give everything I have to build the best future for our country.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes.
Sandra, the other people that stood in the election today were Alex Cole-Hamilton, predictably, Douglas Ross and Anas Sarwar. There was a nice touch at the end of his speech, his acceptance speech, when Mr Swinney crossed the chamber and shook all the party leaders' hands. And I wonder, maybe you could tell us, is that Mr Swinney's personal touch, or is that the norm? But really, for me, the two main things that struck me about his presentation speech, one was that how at the core was his family and his wife Elizabeth, and his wife and his wee boy was in the gallery listening while he was talking. I wonder if you agree with me that he wouldn't have put his hat in the ring unless his wife had said that she wanted him to and was willing to do it. And he talked about collaboration across the chamber. I'll try and be quick, now that he leads a minority government. But do you think the collaboration that he's going to have to work on with his wife at home is going to be equally important if his premiership's going to be a success? And I'd also just like to know, because time's against us, and I should have said that at the start of the show, that we started a wee bit late, so maybe we can steal 5 minutes if you don't mind at the end of the show to make up for time. But I'd like to know what you think about his decision to make the eradication of child poverty his main one of his main aims. So enough from me. Over to his family and poverty eradication.
Yeah, John is a decent man, and you can see that came across. He's steely as well, though. He's got a backbone, and he will stick up for what he believes is right, which obviously comes to the child poverty situation. Yeah, he wouldn't have stood if Elizabeth had said no. I doubt if she would have said no anyway, basically. She's a lovely lady as well. And I met John's mum when I was first elected, actually. She stayed in my Glasgow constituency. So, yeah, everything he said there sums the man up, basically. A statesman. He wants to go on with the job. He talked about collaboration, and he also mentioned the fact that it's a different place, and it certainly is, because I think I said previously as well that and others have said it from other parties to me, that in Holyrood at the moment, or Holyrood, it's a toxic environment. And John kind of touched on that particular part when he talked about collaboration. Because before that, when we had, well, particularly Annabelle, Annabelle, and various other people, people got on. They might not have agreed with each other, but they got on for the sake of Scotland. And child poverty is a huge issue, and I think we have done a lot in the Scottish Government to, make a dent in the child poverty. As reports have said, it's nothing to blow yourself about, saying that basically where our poverty is less than England's poverty, should have no poverty, not in a rich country like Scotland or the UK either. But yeah, that would be one of the things John would definitely be going on and continue on that vein. And I would hope that the other parties would work with John and not be so petty and childish as Douglas Ross had already said. Basically the Tories are there to vote against anything the SNP brings forward. Now that might come back to haunt them. And I hope the media continue to remember that phrase, because that gets nobody anywhere, basically. And at the heart of it, John also mentioned, that we're a party for independence. That's not a secret, but we also want to work to make Scotland a better place at this moment in time. And he's a decent guy, and that was a very statesman-like, lovely speech. And basically, it was holding out a hand. Would it be could you call it friendship? Holding out a hand to say, let's work together and make this better. You can go and do what you want to do, and I'll go on about what I'm going to do in regards to independence. But we can meet in the middle and make Scotland a better place. I thought it was an excellent speech.
And just really briefly, Sandra, I just wonder what your thoughts are about the fact that he has been voted First Minister, but he doesn't actually become First Minister until he gets the seal of approval from King Charles III. What do you think of that?
Well, unfortunately, that's the law, isn't it? That's the legislation at the moment. Basically, I would like to see him just come First Minister. We shouldn't have any of this carry on. You've got to go cap in hand. It doesn't go cap in hand. It's part of, the legislation of the Scottish Office and the Scottish Parliament. They're the ones that will do the rubber stamp. But to me, after listening to that and the fact that he is First Minister, simple as that. He is First Minister, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as lots and lots of people out there are too. He is. He's First Minister. And maybe we should get rid of that archaic law in regards to waiting for somebody else to give you permission. There's lots of other archaic laws I'd like to get rid of right enough, but I suppose we've not got time to talk about that tonight. No. Maybe we can talk about that at another time.
Yes, absolutely, but thank you. So the next item is the UK households are suffering the longest drop in living standards in the G7 as the economy fails to keep up with population growth, new data has shown. Gross domestic product, or GDP, per person fell for 4 quarters in a row across 2023 in the UK and has been at 0% or less since spring 2022, according to the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, otherwise known as the OECD. Although data from the Office for National Statistics, the ONS, shows that overall GDP rose by 0.1% across 2023, on a per-person basis it fell by 0.8%. This measure accounts for population growth, which in the UK was the second highest in the group of seven advanced economies. The figures were in stark contrast to the G7 or group of seven average, where GDP per capita rose by 1.2% last year. Responding, the SNP's economy spokesperson, Drew Hendry MP, said, "This latest data underlines the reality of broken Brexit Britain. Analysis like this highlights exactly why Scotland needs the full powers of a normal independent country so it can rejoin the European Union and the world's largest single market and capitalise on the benefits it brings. He continued with independent countries who are of a similar size to Scotland, like Ireland and Belgium, delivering higher growth and lower inflation rates than the UK. It's clear that it is Westminster who is holding Scotland back. Sandra, it's kind of hinted there in the report that it's a consequence of Brexit, made worse by Brexit, and this hasn't come out of the blue. It's the latest in a long-term continuing trend. Back in November, at the time of the UK government's autumn statement, Humza Yousaf, when he was First Minister, referred to the biggest drop in living standards since the 1950s. And he went on to say, no wonder the Tories never ask a question about this in the Scottish Parliament, the right to be embarrassed by it. I'd just like to then contrast with the new First Minister. How do you think he should tackle this problem, given that he's going to have to work with the Scottish Tories? So what would your advice be to Mr Swinney in terms of working with Douglas Ross on this?
It'd be nice to be asked the advice, basically. I'm sure John would listen to anyone that spoke to me in regards to that. I mean, my advice would be the fact that what we are doing at the moment, particularly with the child payment, carry on with that. My other advice would be that we really, really need to tackle the costs of utilities, electricity, that type of thing as well. And obviously, we've got the cost of food too. So I wouldn't shy away from attacking the Westminster, as I was saying earlier on. Yeah, you can talk about things within the power of the Parliament and what we can do, but it doesn't stop you from raising the fact that obviously we produce more wind power, more electricity, yet we pay money to go onto the grid. We pay more money in standing charges. These things should be together. We should be raising these things, because an awful lot of people out there really don't know why we are charged so much for electricity, why the food prices are up. Yeah, they'll say about Brexit, and that's absolutely correct. But you've got, bankers' bonuses, you've got all these people who have got money offshore, Rees Moggs, all these people. That, in my mind, should be brought up time and time again, and reminding the people, okay, we've got yourself broadcast in Scotland, but what other form of media have we got that will put this message across? So whilst we have this rebuttal unit, as you might call it, which a lot of us are asking just exactly what they do and where is it, and it shouldn't be rebuttal, we should be first on the first foot. We should have debates, and we should be raising these things in the Scottish Parliament, that we can do, obviously, child payment. We've got all these other things that the Scottish Government are doing very, very well to combat poverty, but we shouldn't shy away from the fact that there's issues like utilities and other stuff, food prices, for instance, bankers' bonuses, all of that stuff as well. We shouldn't shy away from that. We should raise that in the Scottish Parliament. That would be my advice to anyone, to John, and it has been my advice to a number of MSPs that I've spoken to. And so that they can be reported in the media and people can understand we don't have the power, unfortunately. Why don't we have the power? That would be my advice anyway. It may not go down as well with the Tories in that respect, but you can't shy away from it. You can have collaborative and governments and work with other parties, but the truth's got to come out and it's got to be said.
Thank you, Sandra. So there you go, Mr Swinney. If you're watching, don't shy away from it and tackle it head on.
Well, I'll expect a phone call.
Yes. Let us know and record it maybe for us and give us an exclusive. So the next item is an estimated 270,000 payroll records belonging to nearly all members of Britain's armed forces have been exposed to Chinese hackers in a breach at a third-party contractor that was discovered a few days ago. The data at risk includes names and bank details and, in a few thousand instances, addresses and national insurance numbers of current and recently departed members of the Army, Navy and Air Force and reservist government sources indicated. Those affected could include MPs who are paid reservists, though the MOD said it would not comment on individual cases. Andrew Morrison, a junior defence minister who acts as a surgeon commander in the Royal Navy, is regularly paid for his work over the past year, according to his declaration in the Parliamentary Register. There is no confirmed evidence that any data has been stolen or interfered with, but inquiries are continuing. Personnel are expected to be offered credit checks so people can monitor if their bank details have been used without permission. In Scotland, it has been revealed that some patient and staff data from the NHS Dumfries and Galloway ransomware hack has been released on the dark web. Scottish Government Health Minister Neil Gray has asked NHS D&G patients and staff to be vigilant and report any suspicious contacts from scammers to Police Scotland. Sandra, I'm a wee bit worried that I might start sounding like a conspiracy theorist with my next question to you. So in recent months, there's been talk about in the media about World War III being on the near horizon. We've got Putin in Russia and a potential Donald Trump returning to the White House as the President of the United States. And am I right to be clumping all of these issues together with the item that we've just done? Or do you think there is a link that China, Russia, America... What do you think?
I think you're right. I'll say it just now. I heard a wee voice, but I don't know what they said. It might have been Linda that was saying something. As I said at the very beginning, can somebody explain to me why America is involved in everything from Ukraine to obviously you've got Yemen, Syria, and poor Palestine and Gaza as well. And now you've got this situation. Conspiracy theory, I don't know if that would be the right word I'd use, but I would like to know why you've got these countries who, America, etc., Britain as well, it's all aimed on Russia and China. You know, is it to divert our attention from what they're actually up to, you know, where it's all going? But, you know, you feel as though you couldn't make this up. So I think there is something in that. Where it's going, I don't know, but I think there's something in it. And, you know, I really worry that there could be a World War III, because we've actually got we see it in Ukraine, we see it in the Yemen, Syria, and obviously in Gaza too. And then you've got this other part where they're blaming Russia and China. What's it all about? That's what I would like to know.
Thank you, Sandra. And that kind of chimes back to you, what you were saying at the start of the show. But thank you. Donald Trump's criminal trial entered a new stage today with testimony from Stormy Daniels, the adult film star at the centre of his hush money scandal. As Daniels took the stand, Trump leaned back in his chair with a passive look on his face as the long-awaited and dramatic moment in the trial arrived. Prosecutors alleged that in 2015, Trump, his then lawyer Michael Cohen, and tabloid publisher David Pecker plotted to bury stories that could thwart Trump's Republican presidential bid. Cohen allegedly arranged a $130,000 hush money payment to Daniels less than 2 weeks before the 2016 presidential election to keep her from going public about a claimed sexual liaison with Trump. Cohen transferred money to Daniels' lawyer via a limited liability company he established specifically for the transaction called Essential Consulting LLC. He allegedly did so through an LLC so that it would not be tracked back to him and thus Trump. Trump is charged with falsifying business records in relation to repaying Cohen. Prosecutors allege that Trump falsely listed these repayments as legal services in business documents. Daniels' testimony came one day after Judge Juan Merchan warned that Trump could face jail if he kept violating a gag order. So, Sandra, just by the way, Trump has breached contempt of court 9 times to date and has been threatened with jail if he does that again for a 10th time. Do you think, and he's now at last been seen in the dock, do you think the US should just jump to the chase and lock him up?
Yes. Yes, I do. Very simple words. Yes, I do. we were talking earlier about the situation in China, etc., and conspiracy theories and all that stuff. I mean, you look at this, I mean, can you imagine if it would make a great movie, actually, when you think about it? Here's a guy, we won't get into the whole scenario of what he's done and all that. It's very well recorded. But, you know, he's broken all these laws 9 times. And they say if you do it a 10th time, we'll jail you. They should have jailed him the very first time. You know, when you talk about World War III, you're in danger of this man being elected. I mean, Biden, you know, I don't think he's any better. Basically, I don't know what America's up to. You know, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, you've got to choose from between Biden and Trump. But Trump is a narcissist, you know. He's just... he's not fit to be president or anything else, and I think they should just lock him up, absolutely, before he does more damage to America's reputation. I don't know if you could do any more with the situation just now in Gaza and Palestine, but he's got this support, and that is the biggest worry of them all. He's got this support about, what is his, make America great again. That's what he always says, isn't it? You know, he should be locked up. Whether it's in a jail or in a psychiatric hospital, I really don't know.
Thank you, Sandra. It's going to be in the news a lot, isn't it? So we're going to be hearing about this a lot, I'm sure. So the Minister for Children, Young People and Keeping the Promise, Natalie Dawn MSP, has launched the revised SSSC codes of practice for social service workers and employers during a visit to an early years service in Edinburgh. Meeting staff and children at the Smiled Childcare Under 3 service, Ms Dawn said she was delighted to launch the new codes that set out the standards required of workers and their employers. The codes, alongside the health and social care standards, are an important part of regulating and improving the quality of care or support individuals experience. All social service employers and workers make a commitment to work in line with the SSSC codes of practice. The Minister said, "These updated codes set out clearly the standards of practice and behaviour expected of everyone working in social services in Scotland. The codes now have a greater focus on relationships, staff well-being and trauma-informed practice. They will play an important role in our ongoing work to keep the promise by making sure they support kind and compassionate care that respects the rights of individuals." Sandra, I had never really heard of the Scottish Social Services Council before now and their codes of practice. But having looked into this just before we came on air, I did see that the codes were kind of updated last year in 2023 and mentioned the promise, which is about young people going through the care service. But so my question to you really is, can you maybe tell us more about what these codes are and why they're important?
I think they're very important because you're dealing with people. I mean, social services, you know, forever are dealing with people. That's the first thing. So you've got to be able to listen. You've got to be able to understand, and you've got to have the proper training, which is a huge thing. And I think, if I'm right, this code mentions, you know, training, and obviously staff as well, and staff to be respected, and be able to recognise the fact that, particularly in the young people coming out of care or whatever, these are vulnerable young adults, and it's just a matter. To me, it's common sense, but obviously it's got to go through legislation as well. If people don't, you know, meet the legislation, then they're quite rightly, you know, they can be reported or pulled in or whatever it is. Very few do, but it's there as a code there, code of practice, which people have to abide by. And for me, the biggest thing that I haven't read the whole thing, but, you know, having been involved, you know, obviously in MSP and this kind of line of work as well, it's very person-centred and it's very personal. And you've got to make sure you know, excuse me, how to treat people, and if it's a trauma situation, you know, what other agencies are there that you can bring in, be involved in. So that to me is a good thing. And what I was glad about the fact was that it took them 2 years to have it, to go through the whole thing and then change it. So they spoke, you know, to the people who are involved along with the staff as well. So it's came from, as I said before, not necessarily grassroots, but it's came from the people who are affected by it and the people who are working in it. And to me, that's a very, very good thing as well. It picks up on what they're saying and they're implementing it in this new code.
Thanks, Sandra. You mentioned training. I'm sure there will be training. I mean, certainly from the 3rd of June, new workers have got 3 months to apply for registration and must be registered within 6 months. So this really is going to start to impact the workforce. You know, people that are working in the sector are going to see changes. And as you say, it talks about the protection and promotion of rights of carers, and to build and maintain trust and confidence of carers, protect the well-being of carers and protect them from harm. And the carers have got to be accountable for the quality of their work. So it's kind of a two-way street, and about improving knowledge. But so yeah, hopefully it's all going to be for the better, for the good. So the next item is a Professor of Engineering at the University of Strathclyde has received an award in recognition of his 40 years of service to the world's largest technical professional organisation. Professor Tariq Durrani, OBE, has been named the 2024 recipient of the IEEE Harridan Pratt Award, which is awarded for outstanding volunteer services to the organisation. His citation commends him for sustained leadership and outstanding contributions to the IEEE in education, technical activities awards and global connections. Professor Durrani, an IEEE Life Fellow, is only the second UK-based academic to receive the award in its 52-year history and the first of 21 years. He received the award at the IEEE Honours Ceremony, which was held in Boston and streamed online. Professor Durrani said, "I am pleased and honoured to receive an award which reflects my commitment to the enhancement of professional practice in engineering and the recruitment of new practitioners. I have achieved both of these through my work with the IEEE and the University of Strathclyde. IEEE has also been highly influential in engineering and approaches to dealing with climate change and its development of new, cleaner technologies. I've played a part in directing this urgent response, and it is very gratifying to have this recognition." Professor Durrani's research covers communications, signal processing, artificial intelligence, and technology management. He has authored more than 400 publications and supervised 45 PhDs during his career and was Deputy Principal of Strathclyde from 2000 to 2006. Professor Durrani has held a range of posts with IEEE, including President of the IEEE, Signal Processing Society, President of the Engineering Management Society, the EMEA, that's the European, Middle East and Africa Regional Director for the IEEE Communication Society, and Vice President for the IEEE Educational Activities Board and IEEE Board Director. In 2023, he chaired the IEEE Coordinating Committee on Climate Change after leading the organisation's delegation at COP26, which was held in Glasgow in 2021. Professor Durrani was instrumental in establishing 2 IEE medals, the IEEE Jack Kilby Signal Processing Medal and the IEEE James Clerk Maxwell Medal in partnership with the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And not wanting to take anything away from Professor Durrani, but I'm just really pleased that I don't have to say IEEE anymore this evening. Sandra, we like to finish the show whenever we can on a good news story, and again, not to take away from Professor Durrani, but this, I've sat in this chair many times in the past months talking about good things that are coming out of Strathclyde University. So it's a Scottish university that seems to be doing really, really well. And other alumni from there include Professor John Curtis that we see on TV all the time these days. But so this is one of those good stories, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I congratulate the Professor and all the work that he's done. It's a great feather in the cap, not just for him, but for Strathclyde University and Scotland as a whole. And we should be shouting it from the rooftops. Well done.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes, and let's let long may it continue as well.
Yes.
So, Sandra, thank you for staying with us a wee bit later to make up the time that we lost at the start of the show. Really appreciate it. So that is it for this evening, but before we go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. You know that our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, then please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. Our focus will now move to securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscriber base and regular funding. Thank you once again to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Brian.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you. It's great to have you. And thank you to you at home for watching. So thank you and good night.